Stephanie White probably thought she was being clever, or maybe just brutally honest, when she stood in front of the cameras and called Caitlin Clark's absence a blessing in disguise. What she got instead was an all-out firestorm. The kind of backlash that takes on a life of its own, with social media dissecting every syllable and fans turning post-game soundbites into rallying cries for change. If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe. The problem here isn't just what White said. It's when she said it, who she said about, and what it revealed about the growing disconnect between the Indiana Fever's most important player and the person tasked with leading her. The context that made it explosive. Caitlin Clark wasn't sitting out because she overslept or skipped a practice. She's been dealing with a groin injury, a notoriously tricky setback for athletes, especially those whose game relies on quick bursts, sharp cuts, and endurance. She's also not just another player on the roster. Clark is the Fever's franchise face, the biggest draw in the WNBA, and the single largest reason Indiana has seen a spike in ticket sales, TV ratings, and national relevance. So when White dismissed her absence as a blessing in disguise, it landed like a slap in the face, both to Clark and to the fans who invested in her journey. How fans heard it, whether White meant it as a tactical observation or not, the phrasing made it sound like she was saying the Fever were better without Clark. And in the world of professional sports, where locker room dynamics are fragile and egos are often tested, that's a dangerous implication to put on record. Within hours, the clip was circulating on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Fans clipped it with slow zooms on White's face. Comment sections exploded with accusations of jealousy, poor leadership, and outright disrespect. By the next morning, "Fire Stephanie White" was trending in certain sports corners online. Not because of one bad play call, but because of what people saw as a fundamental misunderstanding of who Caitlin Clark is to this franchise. The jealousy narrative. Whether fair or not, a narrative quickly formed. Stephanie White can't handle coaching a star bigger than the team. It's a storyline as old as sports itself. The coach who bristles at having a player overshadow their authority. Fans started digging into old interviews, scrutinizing every comment White has made about Clark since she arrived. Any hint of skepticism or minimization suddenly looked like evidence of a deeper bias. And when you combine that with the Fever's uneven performance, it becomes easy for frustrated fans to paint the whole situation as one where the coach is holding the player back. Sophie Cunningham's subtle pushback. Then came Sophie Cunningham, the team's emotional anchor and outspoken personality, who didn't directly call out White, but did make a point to highlight that systems should be built around a team's best players. She's a unique talent. Cunningham said when asked about Clark, "You don't get many players like that. You have to find ways to make it work for them." That one quote, calm, measured, but clearly supportive of Clark, was enough for fans to read between the lines. Cunningham wasn't attacking her coach, but she was making it clear that star talent needs to be maximized, not minimized. The bigger coaching philosophy clash. White's coaching approach has always been rooted in team-first concepts. That's not inherently bad. In fact, at the collegiate and professional level, it's usually the preferred model. But there's a difference between team-first and team-only. Caitlin Clark isn't a normal player. She's not a system point guard who thrives as one of many interchangeable pieces. Her vision, deep shooting range, and pace dictate games, if you build the right structure around them. When White talked about playing our system and not relying on one player to win games, fans hear it as code for resisting building the offense around Clark. And in their eyes, that's not pragmatism, it's stubbornness. Injury mismanagement allegations. The timing of the blessing in disguise comment also hit harder because of ongoing whispers that Clark had been overworked and pushed through pain this season. Her minutes have been heavy. She's absorbed more contact than most players in the league. She's had to carry not just the scoring load, but also the emotional weight of being the WNBA's biggest story every night. So when she finally sits out, hearing her coach frame it as some kind of silver lining instead of an unfortunate setback felt cold and out of touch to many fans. Public relations fallout. From a PR standpoint, the comment was a disaster. The WNBA is in the middle of a historic growth moment, and Clark is at the center of it. Every quote, every public appearance, every storyline involving her gets magnified. White could have easily spun Clark's absence as an opportunity for other players to step up while we miss her leadership. That still acknowledges the benefit of testing depth without framing it as better without her. Instead, the phrasing fed into a media cycle that positioned the coach and player on opposite sides, whether that was her intention or not. The locker room implications, public criticism, even implied, can be a wedge in a locker room. Other players might take it as a signal that the coach is willing to undermine even the most important star. That can breed hesitation and mistrust. On the flip side, if there are already players in the locker room who resent Clark's spotlight, White's comment could embolden them, creating a divide between Clark's people and White's people. In professional sports, once those lines start forming, it's almost impossible to erase them without major roster or staff changes. The coaching job security question. When the backlash hit, sports talk shows immediately started speculating on White's job security. In the WNBA, mid-season firings are rare, but they're not unheard of, especially if ownership believes the coach is standing in the way of a superstar success. Clark is the kind of player franchises will fire a coach to keep happy. That's just reality. If the choice becomes lose Clark's faith or replace the coach, most front offices will protect the player. Fans see wasted potential. At the heart of this controversy is a sense of urgency. Fever fans aren't just watching games. They're watching a generational talent in Clark's early years. They've seen what she can do when surrounded by the right pieces in college. They've seen her put up historic numbers against WNBA competition despite constant defensive targeting. So when they hear a coach imply that taking her off the court might be a good thing, they see wasted potential. And wasted potential in pro sports is a sin that fans rarely forgive. The league-wide optics. This isn't just about Indiana. Other franchises are watching how this plays out. Agents are watching. Prospective free agents are watching. If the perception becomes that the Fever don't value or protect their stars, it will hurt them in recruiting talent. And if Clark's camp starts feeling that the relationship with White is beyond repair, the noise around her future will only get louder. Where this leaves the Fever's front office now has to walk a tightrope. On one hand, they can't appear to be throwing White under the bus for one bad soundbite. On the other, they can't ignore the fact that this moment has exposed a much bigger conversation about coaching philosophy, star treatment, and maximizing generational talent. They can either address it head-on, having a real conversation between White, Clark, and team leaders, or they can try to downplay it and hope it blows over. But in the social media age, these stories rarely just disappear. The blessing in disguise remark might have been a throwaway line in White's mind, but in the world of high-stakes professional sports, it became a moment of truth. It revealed a gap between how the Fever's head coach talks about her superstar and how fans, and perhaps Clark herself, expect that superstar to be treated. And in the WNBA's current climate, where every star is a marketing engine and every headline shapes the league's momentum, that kind of gap can change careers, and maybe even entire franchises, overnight. What makes the situation even more volatile is that Stephanie White isn't just dealing with a random rookie. She's dealing with the most marketable player the league has seen in decades, someone whose mere presence changes ticket sales, TV contracts, and even how often the Fever are scheduled for nationally televised games. In that context, a remark like blessing in disguise isn't just an unfortunate choice of words. It's a public signal that the head coach may not fully grasp, or worse, may not fully embrace the reality of coaching a generational star. The economics behind the tension. Caitlin Clark isn't just an athlete. She's an economic engine. Her games draw more viewers than some NBA broadcasts. Her jersey sales are among the best in the sport. She's driving revenue streams that benefit not only the Fever but the league as a whole. When a coach downplays her absence, it doesn't just raise eyebrows among fans. It makes league executives nervous. They know full well that star-driven economics work only when those stars are happy, healthy, and fully engaged. A perception that Clark is undervalued or undermined threatens that entire formula. White's coaching identity crisis. Stephanie White built her coaching reputation on discipline, structure, and the concept that no player is above the system. That philosophy works in certain team contexts, especially with balanced rosters that don't rely on a single dominant playmaker. But coaching Caitlin Clark is a different job entirely. You don't treat her like one of the pieces. She's a hub, the gravitational center of every offensive set. She's a reason opposing coaches have to rewrite their defensive game plans. For White, this means confronting a coaching identity shift, adapting from a system-first leader to a star-centric tactician. And based on her public comments, it's not clear she's ready to make that leap. The perception of disrespect in pro sports. Athletes at this level are hyper-aware of respect. They can handle criticism. Most of them thrive on it. But disrespect, perceived or real, is different. Clark has been targeted physically all season. She's dealt with constant double teams, hard fouls, and a level of defensive harassment that few rookies ever face. She's also carried the weight of representing a league that, for better or worse, has tied much of its current growth to her. Against that backdrop, hearing her coach call her absence a blessing in disguise is the kind of thing that sticks. Not because Clark is overly sensitive, but because it sends the wrong message about her value to the team's success. The fans' role in escalating the situation. If this had happened in a vacuum, maybe it would have blown over. But Clark's fan base is massive, passionate, and extremely online. They're used to defending her from critics, whether those critics are media personalities, rival fans, or opposing players. The second White's comment hit social media, those fans treated it like an attack. They clipped the video, reposted it with captions like, "Unreal," and "She really said this," and demanded answers. In today's media ecosystem, fan outrage can move the needle in front offices. Owners don't just listen to ticket sales and TV numbers anymore. They monitor sentiment, because negative perception can erode the brand faster than a losing streak. The locker room's unspoken calculations. Inside the Fever's locker room, this isn't just a headline. It's a moment that forces players to assess where they stand. Do they align more with their star, who has already proven she can elevate the team's profile and give them a chance to win? Or do they align with the coach, who controls minutes, roles, and game plans? This isn't a hypothetical divide. In pro sports, these splits happen all the time. If left unresolved, they harden into factions. One side sees themselves as part of the future vision of the team. The other sees themselves as loyal to the existing hierarchy. The subtle art of managing a star. Coaching a player like Clark isn't just about X's and O's. It's about ego management, public messaging, and making sure your star feels both empowered and challenged. Look at the best star coaches in basketball history. Greg Popovich with Tim Duncan, Phil Jackson with Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, Dawn Staley with Leah Boston at South Carolina. They didn't coddle their stars, but they also never gave the impression that the team would be better without them. White's challenge now is figuring out how to repair the perception damage, while also proving she can win with Clark at the center. The injury optics problem. Another layer to the controversy. Groin injuries are not something players can just push through without risking long-term damage. The perception that White was eager to see what the team could do without Clark feeds into a dangerous narrative. That the Fever might be willing to downplay or gamble with the health of their star player. In today's sports climate, where athlete health and load management are front and center topics, that's a terrible look. It invites scrutiny from the media, the league, and even player agents who have a vested interest in protecting their clients' longevity. A case study in misreading the moment. White's blessing in disguise comment is, in many ways, a case study in misreading the moment. It's one thing to think privately that a star's absence could give other players valuable reps. That's a perfectly valid coaching thought. But saying it publicly, in the middle of a season where your team has struggled for consistency and your star is playing through intense pressure, is a messaging blunder of the highest order. Good coaches know when to bite their tongue, when to protect their players and press, and save the real critiques for behind closed doors. The resignation drumbeat, whether justified or not. The controversy has already sparked calls for White's resignation. This isn't because fans think she's an incompetent coach. It's because they believe she's the wrong coach of this player in this moment in franchise history. In pro sports, wrong fit is often the reason coaches lose their jobs more than poor win-loss records. And if the Fever's ownership starts to believe that White and Clark can't coexist productively, the clock on White's tenure could start ticking faster. What happens if nothing changes? If White stays the course, keeps the same public tone, keeps the same system, and doesn't show visible signs of adapting to Clark's style, the pressure will mount. Every loss will be framed as a symptom of a broken star-coach relationship. Every Clark frustration caught on camera will go viral. Every post-game quote will be dissected for passive-aggressive undertones. That's not a sustainable way to run a team, especially one that's supposed to be building around a generational player. The opportunity hidden in the controversy. Ironically, this situation could be salvaged if handled right. White has an opportunity to pivot, to publicly acknowledge Clark's importance, to adjust her system in ways that highlight her star strengths, and to reframe the narrative around partnership rather than conflict. If she can do that, this controversy could eventually be remembered as the moment when coach and player aligned, leading to a stronger, more dangerous Fever team. But that requires humility, adaptability, and a willingness to admit that a one-size-fits-all coaching philosophy doesn't work for every roster. At the end of the day, the blessing in disguise comment was more than just a poorly chosen phrase. It was a flashpoint that exposed underlying tensions about coaching philosophy, star treatment, injury management, and the very identity of the Indiana Fever. And now, Stephanie White has to decide whether she's going to double down on her approach or evolve to meet the moment. Because with Caitlin Clark, there is no middle ground. You either build around her or you eventually lose her. And if the Fever lose her, it won't just be the end of a roster experiment. It could be the end of the most promising era in franchise history before it ever truly begins. If Stephanie White thought this was just a one-week story that would fade away, she's badly miscalculating how the WNBA spotlight works now. This isn't the pre-Clark era, where controversy in Indiana stayed local and maybe got a short segment on league media. We're in the Caitlin Clark era. Every headline tied to her ripples through the sports ecosystem gets amplified on ESPN debate shows and ends up on the front page of sports apps. And because Clark is both a marketing machine and a once-in-a-generation on-court talent, this story has legs. It's not just about a coach's offhand remark. It's become a referendum on whether Indiana truly understands a gift they've been handed. Why this strikes such a nerve? Part of the outrage stems from what Clark represents. She's not just any rookie. She's a bridge between the WNBA's established fan base and a massive influx of new viewers. She's a reason the Fever have more sellouts, higher TV ratings, and a national profile they haven't enjoyed in decades. When White's comment landed, it didn't feel like an internal basketball observation. It felt like a public dismissal of the very thing that's making the Fever relevant again. That's why it stung. And that's why it's resonating far beyond Indiana. A pattern of disconnect. What makes this even more damaging is that it doesn't exist in isolation. Fans and analysts can point to other instances this season where White's messaging seemed out of sync with Clark's reality, praising ball movement after games where Clark was visibly double-teamed into isolation plays, or emphasizing team defense when the real issue was opponents going after Clark with unnecessary physicality. Individually, these moments might not seem like much, but in aggregate, they paint a picture of a coach who's not quite on the same wavelength as her star. And in pro sports, perception often matters as much as reality. The danger of alienating casual fans. Die-hard Fever fans will support the team through growing pains. But the new audience Clark has brought in, the casual sports fan who tuned in after March Madness, the young girls wear her jersey to their first WNBA game. They're less forgiving. They didn't show up to watch developmental basketball or long-term system experiments. They showed up to watch Clark dominate, lead, and, ideally, win. If the team narrative shifts toward coach versus star instead of coach and star, those casuals drift away. And once they're gone, they rarely come back. The player's perspective. Inside the locker room, there's a reality every veteran knows. The star's opinion carries weight. If the franchise player feels the coach isn't the right fit, it's only a matter of time before changes come. That's not about ego, it's about business. Teams will not risk losing a player like Clark because of a coach's philosophy or personality clash. That's why some players may quietly start positioning themselves on the right side of this dynamic, anticipating what the front office might do if the tension continues. Media pressure will keep building. Already, national sports outlets are spinning this into broader debates about coaching in the WNBA. Is the league ready to adapt to the demands of modern star management? Should it follow the NBA model, where coaches often build systems specifically around their marquee players? Those conversations keep the heat on White, even if the Fever string together a few wins. Every press conference will be a minefield. Every answer about Clark's role will be parsed for tone and implication. It's a spotlight White might not have been fully prepared for. The clock is ticking. The Fever don't have unlimited time to figure this out. This isn't a multi-year rebuild where everyone can be patient. Clark's window is now. The league's momentum is now. If the Fever get to mid-season with the same structural and philosophical issues, the narrative hardens. And once that happens, the relationship between player and coach rarely recovers, no matter how many internal meetings or PR statements are rolled out. The choice facing White. At its core, this comes down to whether Stephanie White is willing to adjust her approach for the sake of maximizing Caitlin Clark. That doesn't mean abandoning her principles entirely. It means recognizing that coaching Clark isn't about fitting her into a rigid structure. It's about building the structure around her. If White can make that pivot and publicly signal a partnership rather than a power struggle, this storm could eventually be reframed as a turning point. But if she stays entrenched, banking on the idea that winning alone will smooth over the perception problem, she's underestimating the stakes. Because in the Caitlin Clark era, it's not just about the scoreboard. It's about protecting the star, showcasing the star, and making sure every decision, from rotations to post-game quotes, reflects her value to the franchise. And right now, that's the part Stephanie White is getting wrong.